Hello and welcome to another Talking Shop with Covering Climate Now. I'm Mark Hertsgaard. I'm the Executive Director of Covering Climate Now and the Environment Correspondent for The Nation magazine. Our subject today, covering COP30 in the Amazon. Covering Climate Now is a global collaboration of 500 plus news outlets that reach a total audience of billions of people. We're organized by journalists for journalists to help all of us do a better job of covering the defining story of our time. Go to our, excuse me, go to our website, coveringclimatenow.org. You can see a list of our partners. You can apply to join us and sign up for our weekly newsletters and a whole lot of other resources. A quick housekeeping note today, we have live translation available for this webinar for English to Portuguese and Portuguese to English. One of our panelists from Brazil will be answering questions in Portuguese. So to enable that translation, please go to the bottom of your Zoom, click on the icon that says More, and then it will say, click again for transcription. For English speakers, you want to click on English. For our colleagues in Brazil, click on Portuguese. If you are fluent in both languages, you can just select the original audio. Today's Talking Shop is one of a series of events that Covering Climate Now is organizing around the COP30 UN Climate Summit. It's being held in Brazil next month. The summit's taking place in Belém, which is a city located at the mouth of the Amazon River. The site was chosen by the Brazilian government to emphasize the crucial role the Amazon rainforest and its indigenous inhabitants play in the climate crisis, and especially the solutions to the crisis. Oil, gas, and coal are usually getting most attention in these climate discussions because burning those fossil fuels is responsible for most of the emissions that are overheating the planet. But cutting down forests, often to enable cattle ranching or soybean cultivation, is also a major source of emissions, not only in the Amazon, but in Africa and Asia as well. And as Covering Climate Now has often noted, indigenous people around the world have by far the best track record of protecting their land and its biodiversity from such damaging activities. As journalists everywhere prepare for COP30, it's critical that our coverage is informed by on-the-ground knowledge of people living in the Amazon. When journalists from distant places parachute in to cover a given story, whether it's about climate change or not, it's all too easy for those outside journalists to get things wrong, simply because they're not familiar with the local situation. Today's Talking Shop is a step towards avoiding those kinds of mistakes. We'll be talking with seasoned journalists based in the Amazon about the stories they're working on, how people in the Amazon are feeling about COP30, and how outside journalists can best cover the proceedings, whether we're in Belém in person or covering it remotely from afar. And by the way, don't despair if you are going to be covering COP30 from far away. Many of the proceedings at COP30 will be available and viewable in real time on the UN video feed. Today's Talking Shop is just the beginning. Covering Climate Now is proud to announce today that throughout COP30, we will be making available to our fellow journalists around the world first-class coverage of the summit as reported by journalists across the Amazon. These journalists represent dozens of news outlets. They've joined together in a network called Info Amazonia, and we have Info Amazonia's executive director with us here today. They've already been covering the COP30 story for months, notably the logistical challenges in Belém. And throughout the summit, they will be filing stories on all aspects of COP30. Those stories will be written in Portuguese, but then translated into English and Spanish, and Covering Climate Now will then make those all three versions of the stories available, English, Spanish, Portuguese, available free of charge to newsrooms around the world. Outside journalists and newsrooms are welcome to publish any of those stories themselves, with credit, of course, to Info Amazonia, or they can quote those stories in their own coverage. But perhaps most importantly, we hope that the Info Amazonia coverage will simply inform how journalists outside of the Amazon think and report about the issues that arise at COP30. In a moment, we'll talk about how all this will work in practice. The larger point is that while UN climate summits bring together world leaders and governments to negotiate agreements, Journalists should always remember that the voices of ordinary people and civil society matter just as much. That's also why Covering Climate Now has timed the next phase of our 89% project to COP30. In April, dozens of the world's leading news organizations, as part of this 89% project, began reporting one of the most surprising climate stories in years. That contrary to conventional wisdom, the overwhelming majority of people on this planet, 80 to 89%, want their governments to take stronger climate action. But that overwhelming majority doesn't realize it's the majority. It thinks it's the minority. So it doesn't act like a majority, it doesn't vote like a majority, doesn't push its political leaders like a majority. So to address this knowledge gap, CCNow partners and journalists everywhere are invited to participate in a surge of coverage during a joint coverage week starting October 26, when we will be publishing a lot more stories about the 89%. Agence France Presse, for example, they will be reporting from 5 continents about people's positive climate tipping points. That is, what was the moment in a given person's life when they shifted from being a part of the 89% who passively want their government to do something about climate change to saying, I decided I have to do something myself to push my government or to reduce my own carbon footprint by putting solar panels on my roof, whatever it may be. So that's October 26th, the joint coverage week. Come to Covering Climate Now's website and you'll find out more about that. So we've got a lot to discuss today and an excellent trio of colleagues to do it with. Let me introduce them quickly now here. First, Miguel Peixe. I hope I pronounced that more or less correctly. He's a product engineer at Newspack. He's previously worked with a range of journalism outlets across Brazil, including Info Amazonia, Agência Pública, and Repórter Brasil. Also joining us, Steffanie Schmidt. She's reported from many Brazilian news outlets, including Globo, El País Brasil, and Amazonia Real. She's now helping to revitalize the independent news outlet Jornal Varadouro. And Stefano Robleski. He's the executive director of Info Amazonia. He's directed journalist networks in Brazil and across Latin America for years. And he's the vice president of the Brazilian Environmental Journalism Network. Now, I ask all of you to please join me in giving a warm virtual welcome to all 3 of our panelists today. So I will start by asking them questions in the first half hour, and then we'll be going to your questions from the audience. Please put your questions in the Q&A at the bottom, or the chat in the bottom. And when you do, please give both your name and your news outlet. And please, these questions are reserved for journalists only. If you're not a journalist, please don't clutter up the chat with questions. So to begin, I'd like to start with Stefano, and thank you so much, Stefano, for being here today and for all the work that you're doing with Info Amazonia. We're going to talk about the sharing of content during COP30 in a moment, but I'd like to start with a larger question. What are the key perspectives that people in the Amazon are telling you in your reporting and your colleagues? What are you hearing from people in the Amazon about what they look forward to at COP30 and maybe also what they're afraid of at COP30 happening?
Hi, Mark. Thanks everyone for being here. It's a pleasure to join you today. Mark, before I go to that question, I would just like to mention that Info Amazonia is part of a pool of outlets. One of them is Varadouro. And the initiative that is bringing us together at COP for the collaborative coverage you mentioned is called the House of Social Environmental Journalism. So it's not that's an initiative that started a year ago to get to this point and was made by 8 different organizations, and then we started inviting other outlets. So it's not just one initiative that with Info Amazonia, but several different organizations working with us. Just to mention that. And on the most pressing issues that for this COP, I would say this COP will be more different, well, different than others, because of the fact that previous COP happened um, in countries that are very that do very much work on oil, fossil exploring. So and even though Brazil explores oil very much, we have our own state's company that's huge. The activity that we are more that's stronger in our economy is the agro sector. So I expect that this sector, politicians around that sector, might be pushing for changes on that. And even I know of some companies trying to change the how their share um, on putting methane on the atmosphere could be lower than science has been saying. So they are trying to change numbers, change science as it's been. So I would say most pressing issues, topics that global journalists should pay attention to, may relate to this sector, mostly at this COP.
So the
Besides,
agribusiness sector is what you're saying is going to be the primary business focus coming out of Brazil for this COP, which certainly makes sense. What about civil society? What are people on the ground, separate from the big lobbying groups, which of course will try to influence them? But what are people on the ground across Amazonia? What are your reporters telling you about how? I mean, where are they that the COP is happening? Are they looking forward with anticipation, with fear and worry, or and how do people feel about Lula's leadership on this front?
well, in my perspective, I see two different movements. I have seen several social movements saying, "Oh, COP is not something for us. We don't have anything to do with that because that's all global politics. It's not going to affect us." I would say they are wrong thinking about that. And I see several other movements joining together to go to COP. As you may have seen, we have some logistical issues, some prices going up on hosting in Belém. So I have seen a very interesting movement of to overcome that issue, and also to see that um, as an opportunity. I see different organizations working together to go to COP, to participate on that. And what is more interesting is that because it's happening in a democratic country, um, I'm seeing civil society stronger than previous editions in this on their participation on what they are doing. It's beautiful to see different initiatives going by boat to Belém. I have heard about different about uh, 4 or 5 different initiatives coming all the way from closer cities like Santarém, which is just 1.5 hour by plane from Belém, so and a few days by boat, and even initiatives coming all the way from Ecuador, which means a full month of boats traveling all the way to Belém, just to participate on this edition of COP. So that's amazing. I see lots of opportunities for those organizations and for coverage that will also be very interesting to see, and something that I haven't seen for the past several years, at least.
That is fascinating indeed to hear that there will be civil society representatives coming all the way from Ecuador. So I say to my journalistic colleagues around the world, those are stories that would be fascinating to tell. Remember, Belém is at the mouth of the Amazon River. A lot of the travel there happens by boat. It does not happen necessarily by car or airplane. The Amazon River is a, aquatic highway, you could almost call it. So there will be a lot of opportunities if you are in Belém to seek out these civil society representatives, go down to the waterfront and just see who's hanging about there, and you'll have some, I think, some great stories. That's Stefano Robleski with Info Amazonia, and he mentioned that civil society exists in Brazil. It's a democratic society, very interesting, of course, within the larger context. It's also a very contested civil society. And we saw recently that the Brazilian court system held accountable the former president, Jair Bolsonaro, for basically trying to overthrow the election results. And interesting contrast to here in the United States, where the previous president who tried to overthrow the 2020 election results not only has not been held accountable by the justice system, he was actually reelected, and the Supreme Court has given him presidential immunity. So that's another thing to bear in mind as we journalists from outside Brazil go into Brazil, that it is a country that has had a dictatorship and military dictatorship for many years in the 60s and 70s and even into the 80s, and then has had a very contested democratic society ever since then. So these are larger streams of political themes that we want to be watching and how they affect the proceedings at COP30. I'd like to turn now to Steffanie Schmidt and ask her much the same question, Steffanie. But in particular, you're working with a news organization that was a symbol of the resistance to the dictatorship. And you're working with them now. And I wonder what you would say about what is the strength of civil society now, and how much is Brazilian civil society focused on this COP? Or, as Stefano said, is there this split between some saying, oh, COP doesn't matter, and others who do not feel that way? What is your reporting telling you? And she's just pausing
Bom,
because
muito
the translator is
obrigada
giving her my
pela
Go ahead.
oportunidade. Eu estou atuando já há 2 anos nesse veículo que representa justamente essa resistência, né? Essa voz das pessoas que estão no território e que não necessariamente aparecem ou são notícias sem interesse dentro da cobertura tradicional, ou mesmo local. E a realidade dessas pessoas, nós inclusive soltamos um material recente no Dia da Amazônia, que foi 5 de setembro. A visão delas é que, na verdade, pouca coisa vai mudar no dia a dia delas, porque preservar a floresta e fazer o que elas fazem, elas vão continuar fazendo. O que elas não têm é apoio. Então, hoje, esse olhar que se tem para a Amazônia de um grande vazio verde, ou de uma floresta que, de repente, precisa se manter, né, um ecossistema que precisa ser preservado, e o como. Então, essas vozes, essas pessoas que são lideranças dentro de unidades de conservação, colocam diversos problemas que afetam diariamente a vida delas. Então, direitos básicos dessas pessoas não são garantidos. Um exemplo disso, de uma liderança dentro de uma dessas reservas, ela coloca que briga 25 anos por uma escola. E ela mesma se questiona e diz assim, não vale a pena a gente começar a educar as crianças hoje para depois, lá no futuro, eu não ter que corrigir e dizer, olha, não desmate. Então, é um modelo de vida extrativista que mantém a floresta em pé, mas que não recebem incentivo nenhum. Então, eles mesmos falam, quando se coloca uma meta de desmatamento zero, como isso vai ser feito? Só com repressão? Né? Então, a gente não tem aqui saúde, não tem educação, não garante esses direitos básicos. E aí, quando você cresce, só existe um modelo de desenvolvimento, que é esse exploratório. Então, hoje, o que se coloca nessa perspectiva dessas pessoas é esse olhar para a Amazônia um pouco mais da dimensão humana. E se você olhar a forma de ocupação que a Amazônia é feita, então ela não tem, ela está toda interligada, como o Steffanie falou aí, por meio de rios. Né? Você não tem vazios. Você tem uma ocupação hoje que ela é feita por meio de rios. Só que olha-se de forma isolada. E isso prejudica demais a dimensão da preservação e da conservação. Se você olhar também sobre a perspectiva de que as cidades também são a Amazônia, e se você não tem uma população amazônica que tenha esse olhar de integração com a floresta, pouca coisa vai se conseguir no efetivo, no dia a dia, de garantir essa conservação. Então, acho que é um pouco
Stephanie, let me stop you there, please, because I'm feeling for our translator. And that's an awful lot that he's got to translate in one moment. So let me interrupt you, please, and ask him to tell us what you've been saying.
ok. Perfeito. Bom, a gente, quando fala dessa ideia da Amazônia, me ouve dessa perspectiva das populações, é que essa conexão das pessoas com a floresta, ela já acontece. Então, não é algo novo o que se traz de discussão sobre a necessidade de manter uma floresta em pé, de se manter um ecossistema equilibrado, de se olhar para isso. Não é novo para essas pessoas que já fazem isso. Que elas pedem protagonismo, é serem ouvidas. Então, quando se coloca uma ideia, por exemplo, de desmatamento zero, uma meta, né, que são as NDCs aí dos países, como você vai fazer isso, né? Com políticas, com ciência, ok. Você precisa de seres humanos conduzindo isso. Então, olhar para essa dimensão humana é que pode fazer diferença nessa perspectiva, né, de virada de chave, de mudança. E algumas lideranças que nós ouvimos, inclusive publicamos um material recentemente, no Dia da Amazônia, dia 5 de setembro, coloca dessa forma, que se você hoje não tem direitos básicos garantidos, como saúde, como educação, para essas pessoas que mantêm floresta em pé, elas já sabem como fazer, isso já acontece mas numa dimensão micro, dentro de reservas, são comunidades, e são essas comunidades que estão se mobilizando para serem ouvidas, para ir para a COP, como o Stefano colocou. Quem, de fato, vamos dizer, não se importaria tanto, não sabe como fazer, vai ter a sua voz garantida lá. São as grandes corporações, enfim, a própria as empresas que têm interesses comerciais exploratórios na questão mineral, principalmente dentro da Amazônia, estão lá representadas. Então, ela coloca dessa forma. E aí você, para essa população que não tem seus direitos garantidos, e seja na floresta, seja na cidade, porque as cidades
While Steffanie is adjusting her microphone, first let me apologize. I misunderstood. I'm glad to hear that we have the simultaneous interpretation. And by the way, for that, we'd like to thank Gustavo Filippi, who is doing a terrific job on the interpretation. And what Steffanie Schmidt has been saying about the importance of talking to the people there, this corresponds with, again, what Covering Climate Now has been saying for a long time, that the best climate coverage does three things: that it humanizes the climate story, and it localizes the story, and it solutionizes the story. And journalists who are going to be covering this, her other point about how the indigenous people know how to protect the forest, that is not just a claim by indigenous people. That is a scientifically demonstrated point that peer-reviewed science has found over and over again. And we've reported this at Covering Climate Now and cited in particular the work of who works with The Guardian and also Suma Uma, that the single most important parameter, if you look at what keeps forests standing and what keeps ecosystems healthy and alive, is if indigenous people have legal rights to protect their land. If they have those rights, they will protect the land far better than any legislation passed in a distant capital. I think, Steffanie, your microphone may be working again now. Let's try it and see. And I'm going to ask you a different question, though, and I want also to ask this to Stefano, and then Miguel, I'm going to go to you after that. What are the other stories that you think that outside journalists, as they come to Belém to cover COP30, or
Hi, everyone. I'm David Dixon. I am a TV engagement coordinator with Covering Climate Now. It seems that Mark is frozen, so we're going to go ahead and pick it up from there and just continue on, and hopefully we can get Mark back. But I want to continue over to Miguel because, as we mentioned a little bit earlier, some of these mechanics about the Info Amazonia content sharing is really fascinating, but I think it might be good for us to kind of discuss and talk about how this might work in practical terms. And I think both Miguel as well as Stefano might need to kind of collab on this to kind of explain to all of our colleagues here how this is going to work for COP30.
Yeah, David. We have been working for the past, as I was mentioning at the beginning of this webinar, we have been working for the past year with different organizations to produce this collaborative coverage of COP30. We saw an opportunity as we have a very vibrant ecosystem of news outlets focused on environmental issues in Brazil. But most of these outlets are also very somewhat small, and will be sending 3, 5, or 6 people to COP. So we thought, why don't we do this coverage together and provide contents for others from other outlets or other countries together, translated to Spanish and English for the most relevant contents. So that's what we decided to do in a way that we don't all overlap on the same coverage. So Steffanie, for instance, may cover something related to the Blue Zone at the same time that Info Amazonia will be covering something on the green zone, or even the yellow zone, which is how some social movements have been calling the parts of the city where they will be acting. So by doing that and collaborating, we expect to provide contents to everyone and who need or expecting to cover COP30. And one good way of doing that is by providing a live feed. And that's what Miguel has been developing for the past months. And he will show us now what exactly that means.
Thank you, Stefano. Thank you, David. A little backstory before I go to the presentation. This project actually started almost 10 years ago, and actually I was looking on Wikipedia. It's almost 10 years that the origin of this happened. In 5th of November of 2015, we had the Mariana Dam disaster in Brazil, which was probably the worst environmental disaster that we have in record. And at that time, a friend of mine started producing a documentary in Bento Rodrigues. The documentary is called O Lugar Mais Seguro do Mundo, or The Safest Place in the World. And at the time, she really wanted a journaling tool with the subjects of the documentary as well as part of the journaling tool. And at that time, she said to me that they don't have computer, they wouldn't know how to use a CMS to be part of that conversation. So we discussed about how would it be possible for us to make them be part of a journaling tool as easy as an instant messenger or WhatsApp or Telegram or Signal. So that's how this project first came to be. We developed something that turns your instant messenger, Telegram, into a live feed instantly via a bot. So that's how the project began 10 years ago. And it stayed dormant for all this time until Stefano remembered that this project existed and reached out to me. And it fits so well, and it's very inspiring to work with them. Such a great initiative. And now it's way more robust. It has a lot more features. And I am ready to share. Let's see. You just find the tab.
Yeah, Miguel, let me know if you are able to share your screen or not. And if not, we'll make sure we can ensure that.
Yeah, I think I'm ready. All right. So this is an example of the dashboard of a live feed. So in here we have a live summary where they can collaboratively edit the summary, which is also updated live as well as the content. And below they can see the posts. They can post from here. They can manage the feed from here. And they can add the provider. So in here, this example, if you go here, this is a post that was created inside the dashboard. But this is a collection of messages that came from Telegram. So I can add it from here as well. So if someone sent a message that needs some adjustments, someone from the newsroom can adjust. It supports multimedia. So if you post an image from Telegram, it gets here. If you post a video from Telegram, it'll get here. And basically that works with a Telegram group. So what we have here are providers, and you can have as many providers as you want. So you can have providers, groups in Spanish, groups in English, groups in Portuguese, and then you can figure how each of the groups get into your feed. So for example, in this example, I have my live feed. So in here, if I edit it, I can say that this content from this feed comes as draft. So it allows you, for example, in this case, I will have a Portuguese feed, but will receive content from Spanish and English. So I can translate it, I can transform it into posts, I can make it part of my summary somehow. So it will come in as draft, and then you can actively act on the content that is that's coming in. And you could also invite citizen journalists to have a group as well, and that will come in as well. So you have a very powerful tool for collaboratively edits and a lot of participation is possible with this kind of tool. And I can show you. So I don't know if so I'm gonna try to show in the webcam. Okay, so this is Telegram. I'm gonna write something, and then you'll see I'm gonna send, and then it instantly popped into the dashboard. And this one popped in as draft because I'm sending from a group that is configured to be my live feed guests. So everything that comes in comes as draft. And that is also populating here, which is a standard URL that you can share. So every feed will have a URL that can be shared, but the most important part is the flexibility on the output. So the tool will provide a WordPress plugin. So every participant publisher can install the plugin and then embed it as a block, as a Gutenberg block in WordPress. And that will allow you to have a lot of flexibility on the styles as well. So it will incorporate very well with the styles of the site, any typography, the headings, size, the spacings, everything will be reflected off the site's original design. Or if you're not using WordPress, you can embed via JavaScript. It only requires a script and then a tag in which the script will replace and embed the feed. This will also reflect the site's design. So it's not an iframe, it's not a box. It actually injects DOM into the site. So it's actually content in the site. Yeah, this is a very rough demo of how it's going to work.
Thank you so much, Miguel. And I apologize, everyone. I got kicked off my internet here as well, but I'm back. And this is a very exciting initiative. And I want to underscore to folks how unique this is. I can't think of another situation like this where a network of journalists is getting together and bringing all their coverage forward and then sharing it with the rest of the world. And as I said earlier, every outlet is free to use this material, to publish this material. You can also quote from this material. If you publish, of course, give credit to the originating outlet, whether it be Info Amazonia or the outlet that actually wrote the content. We'd appreciate it if you'd also mention Covering Climate Now, and you can use our logo. But this is really quite a unique initiative. And whether outside journalists publish it directly or not, at the very least, we hope that it will inform your coverage of COP30 so that you realize that it's not just what world leaders say in sound bites, it's also what people on the ground are telling local journalists about the situation. And in that regard, I want to go back to Steffanie Schmidt for one more question. Before we start taking questions from our colleagues here, let me just remind everybody, if you do have a question, please put it in the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. Tell us your name and also who you work for, and if you are a freelancer, who you freelance for. But Steffanie Schmidt, if I may return to you now, just talk a little bit about this tool and how it looks to someone on the originating end of it, actually. I mean, to me, it sounds quite exciting to be able to share and reflect the voices of people on the ground in the Amazon in Brazil with colleagues in the media around the world. But could you talk a little bit about that and whether how you plan to approach that mission as COP30 approaches? I see you've turned off your video, so I'm assuming you may still be having. Here we go. Oh, no, that's Gustavo. We cannot hear Steffanie. Steffanie, we're going to pause then for a moment and let me go to a couple of questions from our colleagues, and then we will return to you. First question came in from Jyoti Shinoli, senior reporter with the People's Archive of Rural India. A question is, how is the deforestation in the Amazon affecting this flying rivers, the atmospheric rivers? Those are the big weather patterns that bring rainfall throughout the Amazon. Scientists have warned about severe drought. What kind of issues are people in rural areas of Brazil facing because of this in terms of drinking water and farming? Stefano, do you want to talk to that question, please?
Yeah, I think the way we can most see how that's affecting rain patterns and everything is through one example. If you check news on Bogota, capital of Colombia, you'll see for the past 2 years they had issues with water. How does it say? Sorry, I'm missing the English word. People
Scarcity?
are sorry.
Water scarcity?
Yes, water scarcity. So they are having issues with that. People in the cities having issues with that, or they have had for the past couple of years. And that's the most severe drought since the 70s, or that was, which is something huge for a city that's close to several páramos, which is how this ecosystem is called. Páramos are several huge lakes that happen because of rains that are formed initially in the eastern Amazon region, so around Belém area, and it gets bigger and bigger across the Amazon region, and then when it reaches the Andean region, it becomes rain, and then these rains generate these huge lakes. So Bogota has for the past 30 years, they haven't had 30 or 40 years, they haven't had issues with water disponibility, and that has happened in the past couple of years. It's hard to imagine that's not related to deforestation in the Brazilian Amazon. So I think, to answer this very quickly, I think this example tells a lot on the issues that we are having. There are several other examples, and I could mention many ones all across Latin America. But I think this is the most significant, we could say.
Yeah, and the latest science that we've seen, at least reported in the Western press, is that Brazilian scientists are saying that the Amazon rainforest is on the verge of a tipping point, where it will stop being a rainforest and gradually but inexorably become a savanna, meaning a dry sort of meadow-like environment. And of course, that would have massive and negative implications for agriculture across Latin America, not just in Brazil. And that agriculture is not just the big agribusiness, soy farms and cattle, but indigenous people and small scale farmers as well. Let's go to a second question now from Leandro Blanco, who freelances for many outlets in Brazil, who writes, I went to the Amazon in June, and I was surprised to talk to dozens of indigenous leaders who are deeply resentful of environmentalists. These indigenous leaders want to raise some cattle to avoid famine, to expand their crops. Sometimes they want to mine on their lands, and they say that the government and environmentalists want to trap them in poverty and, quote, traditional ways of life, unquote. How do you suggest that we journalists approach this situation? Do you think these indigenous voices will be present in COP30? Question mark. And I, Mark Hertsgaard, would add, do you think that these indigenous voices, are they representative of indigenous opinion? I assume that there are many different opinions on these issues among indigenous people. It's not monolithic. But Steffanie, let's hope that your microphone is working again now. Steffanie, we still cannot hear you. I don't know what to tell you, but our interpreter is saying that he can't hear you either. So please have another look at your screen. Maybe there's something that is going on. Because we see your lips move, but we don't hear your voice. Stefano, can you speak to that for a second? I assume there is a range of opinions among indigenous leaders in the Amazon, no?
For sure. I think this question, what Leandro saw during his trips, also tell a story of lack of opportunities for indigenous peoples, and some of them leaning towards losing their cultural aspects, their historic livelihood, to do that, to expanding crops, to mine on their lands. And that's sorry, there is an echo now.
Yeah, it's okay. Go ahead.
So, and that's so whereas so that connects to how to how they see and the issues that they have, and that's mostly because of lack of support for living as they have always lived. I think there are spaces to tackle on this, to mention this issue, but mostly on a way to help them not needing to survive on this way, and in more sustainable ways where they can, continue to live as they have always lived.
Let me ask you, Stefano, in this regard, what has the Lula government's position been on this? Have they, rhetorically, they support the rights of indigenous people. Is that playing out also in their policies?
It's difficult to mention to answer that very quickly, because Brazil is a country with several different parties. It's not just two, and so you have to form coalitions with different parties, and then Lula to govern. And Lula's government also has some right-wing politicians in its head office, as well in its secretaries. So what I see is there are departments working towards protecting the indigenous peoples, and others that are more interested in this sort of development, this economic development that brings environmental destruction. We cannot forget that a dam called Belo Monte was built during a Labour Party government, Dilma Rousseff, who succeeded Lula. And that's a total failure for the Xingu region, a region in the Amazon forest. So I think it's always more complicated. What I can tell is that this government has been doing so much more and doing much better than the previous one, which basically did nothing for the indigenous people and just did it against these people. So we see some very important initiatives, but it's also difficult. Lula's government, for instance, is trying to push for exploring oil at the mouth of the Amazon region, the Amazon River, which is totally not good. But also inside the same government, there are strong voices against that. So it's I have
Mix.
mixed feelings. Yeah.
Thank you. That's Stefano Robleskis with Info Amazonia. Let me go to a couple more questions here before we finish at the top of the hour. But first, let me just emphasize to all of our colleagues around the world that Covering Climate Now will be present in Belém for COP30. We'll be doing a number of events, including some journalist-only happy hours to build some community there. And stay tuned for some other news on that that we're not quite ready to announce yet, but we will be in COP30. And if you are having questions about how this content sharing will work that Miguel explained to us so nicely before, please get in touch with us. We'll walk you through it. Email us at editors@coveringclimatenow.org. So 2 more quick questions here from our colleagues. One is from Caroline O'Doherty. She's the climate and science correspondent for the Irish Times newspaper. She asks, what decisions, pledges, or agreements do Brazilian climate activists want to see happen at COP30? And I'm going to try one last time to see if Steffanie Schmidt can answer this. And if not, Stefano, I'm going to put you on the spot one more time. But Steffanie, can you, we'll see if your microphone has returned.
Bom, eu creio que seja alguns fatores relacionados a questões de logística e questões energéticas. Os ativistas brasileiros têm essa preocupação justamente porque o pano de fundo, esse que o Stefano colocou muito bem, inclusive, é essa necessidade do governo brasileiro de ter uma política de desenvolvimento para o país e para a Amazônia. Então, hoje você tem uma perspectiva de exploração de petróleo dentro da Amazônia, que já se caminha como um fato consolidado. Você tem rodovias que estão numa polêmica há mais de 10 anos e que estão prestes a serem aprovadas na parte mais preservada da Amazônia e que tradicionalmente é um modelo vetor de desmatamento. Então, eu penso que questões logísticas e energéticas são os fatores fundamentais hoje no debate, né? Então, se o governo se posiciona de uma forma ambígua em relação a isso, isso gera espaço justamente para os lobbies e para que demais outros interesses, né, voltados ao capital prevaleçam sobre o olhar e a visão dessas populações que estão nesses territórios. E aí, lembrando que essas populações que estão nesses territórios, elas não estão descoladas de o que alguns cientistas locais chamam de psicosfera. Então, é como se fosse um ecossistema de pensamento único, de que também queremos fazer parte desse desenvolvimento global, mas não sabemos como, e aí só copia um modelo já existente. Não se pensa num modelo a partir da Amazônia, de como ela vem sendo ocupada em termos milenares e ancestrais, mas de um modelo só desenvolvimentista dos últimos praticamente 50 anos.
So again, to my colleagues around the world, there's a story right there. If there's going to be oil development right at the mouth of the Amazon River, then if you're in Belém, you're right near it. You can write about that. And I'm going to ask one last question here, but two really, because one is from me. Is it not true, we read this, that Lula has the executive branch, of course, but that in the legislature in Brazil, there's still very strong agribusiness interests that are in decisive roles. Many Bolsonaro allies are still there in the legislature. And that, of course, complicates in a democratic system. The president can't just deliver decrees like he's a king, unless he's Donald Trump, I guess. But in Brazil, tell us how that is playing out, the role of the legislature. And then the second question comes from our colleague Liliana Cavazos. She's at Verificado MX in Mexico, and she wants to ask about disinformation in the context of COP30. What specific types of disinformation or even misleading frames do you anticipate will be targeted at Brazilian journalists and local media? So, Steffanie, can you talk about that? My first question was, doesn't the Bolsonaro segment of politics still hold decisive power in the legislature? And then also the disinformation. But quickly, please, we're at the top of the hour.
Bom, eu creio que a informação principalmente ligada ao greenwashing, né, que se diz hoje. Então, é possível você continuar vivendo dessa mesma forma, consumindo desenfreadamente e preservar. Isso é impossível, se você pensar. Então, eu creio que o grande processo de desinformação deve ser nessa linha, né, de meias-verdades. Então, você não nega necessariamente a questão climática, porque ela é um fato, vai acontecer uma reunião dessa monta, mas você pinta ela com a narrativa que você quer. E essa narrativa ela vai estar ligada aos interesses, né, econômicos que prevalecem sobre os interesses das populações dos territórios.
So as far as greenwashing and disinformation, look to us at Covering Climate Now and our colleagues at Info Amazonia. They will be covering this. That is one of the reasons that this opportunity to be relying on their coverage is so valuable for us as outsiders, is that our Brazilian colleagues are seeing this on the ground. And by writing about it and by us reading what they're doing and publishing, if possible, we can understand the disinformation that is being attempted during COP30. And more importantly, we can then warn our readers and our listeners and our viewers about that disinformation so that they are not taken in by it. And so with that, I'm going to call this session to a close. I want to thank all three of our panelists. Stefano Robleski at Info Amazonia, Miguel Peixe, who is our technical genius here on this front. Thank you so much. And Steffanie Schmidt, who has joined us as well, and Gustavo Filippi, who has done the interpreting. We apologize for the technical difficulties we've encountered in this hour. Please stay with us. Come to editors@coveringclimatenow.org for more information about how you and your newsroom can take advantage of this remarkable journalistic initiative coming out of the Amazon that will enable all of us to do better coverage of COP30 as it goes forward. Thanks again to everyone who's been here, and on behalf of Covering Climate Now, this is Mark Hertsgaard wishing you a very pleasant day.